In Mongolia's Gobi Desert, distance itself becomes the first daily condition. A single walk across this ground shows how every errand begins with effort. Sparse tracks and open wind turn simple movement into careful planning. Even the sand records pressure, while plants survive in protected pockets. From above, pasture appears thin, making every grazing area valuable. Where dunes meet grass, animals find one of the day's few advantages. Looking far ahead is practical work when herds scatter across open land. A bird crossing wide sky shows how widely life must search. A narrow green strip can gather animals more surely than any fence. Camels suit broken ground because endurance matters more than speed. From a distance, the herd turns empty land into usable pasture. Behind them, the herder reads tracks, pace, and the animal's needs. Thick coats and steady bodies make camels valuable partners in dry country. One hardy shrub explains why small plants matter in a vast desert. Goats and sheep spread across the plain, converting rough pasture into food. Outside the ger, tires and packed earth help secure the home. Crowded animals mean wealth and responsibility gathered within a small boundary. Inside, storage, cooking, and shelter share one carefully organized room. Before the next task, heavy clothing prepares the body for open weather. Outside again, people and animals move together across bare ground. Close handling keeps the flock orderly without wasting strength in the dust. The pen gives shape to work that the open plain cannot contain. Gathering the goats protects food, breeding stock, and future work. At the fence, individual animals still need care within the larger herd. A herder's reach depends on timing, distance, and the animal's movement. A young goat near the wall shows why shelter is also a nursery. Small animals require attention because next season's herd begins with them. Under rough shade, horns and bodies crowd together away from harsh light. Carrying the kid keeps fragile life safe while the flock shifts around it. Straw and shade create a protected corner for animals that cannot yet keep up. A simple latch matters when every gate controls labor, safety, and loss. When the gate opens, control comes from patience rather than force. The rope gives one restless animal a boundary without stopping the whole flock. From above, the camp looks small beside the work it supports. A basin beside fuel shows how tools stay ready for repeated tasks. Repairing and tying are part of herd work, not separate chores. The dog extends the herder's reach across ground to wide for one person. Modern transport joins older skills, carrying bulky supplies across difficult distance. Every tied bundle on the motorcycle must hold through dust and uneven ground. Beside the ger, departure begins with one last check of the load. Across the plain, the motorcycle shortens distances that still remain demanding. In the hills, loose stone makes every route slower and more deliberate. A stopped bike turns the journey into problem-solving far from easy help. Before continuing, the rider checks containers that will matter back home. At the well, water appears only through effort, tools, and patience. Metal containers turn this distant water point into a household resource. The trough gathers a rare supply that animals and people both depend on. Sealing the can is as important as drawing the water itself. After the fill, careful loading protects the water for the return trip. Hands return to the controls, and the road becomes the next task. The empty track shows how far basic supplies must travel. A roadside marker gives direction where the landscape offers few fixed points. Even here, animals search out the thin pasture hidden among rocks. Green leaves in this dry basin turn scarcity into a usable resource. Dirt tracks trace practical routes across slopes of rock and sand. From the motorcycle, the ger becomes the anchor after hours of distance. Back at the doorway, the journey's load becomes indoor work. Water poured into storage changes a distant errand into tomorrow's cooking. The doorway marks a shift from glare outside to work inside. Tied fabric and rope keep the ger steady against open weather. Around the home, animals share the same scarce shade and rough ground. Inside, fuel is sorted before any meal can truly begin. Flour and water are measured close to the floor, with practiced hands. This quiet mixing turns stored staples into food for the household. A small dough ball shows how carefully each ingredient is used. A framed portrait places family history beside the labor of daily cooking. Scraps on the board stay visible, because waste has little place here. Hanging utensils keep the compact kitchen ready for the next step. Shredded meat adds strength to the meal without needing complicated tools. Fuel goes into the stove, turning stored scraps into heat for cooking. Fire is built piece by piece, because heat must be managed closely. The meat is broken smaller, so it can cook evenly and stretch further. Hot water begins the broth, tying fuel, water, and food together. A small flame below the basin steadies the cooking process. On the board, dough is pressed flat for a meal made by hand. The work spreads across the floor, where the room becomes the kitchen. Overhead, the round roof brings daylight into a tightly organized home. Rolling the dough thin prepares it for quick cooking and easy sharing. Outside, a solar panel and motorcycle show adaptation without leaving tradition behind. At the stove, controlled flame finishes the link between water, fuel, and food. The day moves from indoor fire to repairing the machine that crosses open ground. After travel comes food work, where meat is prepared by hand for the household. Heat, broth, and careful hands keep the meal moving through each small step. The firebox anchors the room, while dough work begins beside the stove. Stirring the meat slowly turns stored ingredients into food ready for sharing. A deep ladle controls the broth, because nothing here is handled carelessly. A religious image shares the room with food work, belief beside daily need. Steam rises from the pot, showing how quickly heat must be managed indoors. Beyond the doorway, open land makes every home feel exposed and carefully placed. Even outside, animals stay close to the shelter, tied to the household's needs. Cutting dough into strips turns floor work into a meal built for speed. The knife work is precise, saving fuel once the pot is ready. Photographs and wool images keep personal memory inside a movable home. The noodles enter the broth, where earlier handwork becomes hot food. A cloth bundle keeps food protected as preparation continues on the floor. The stove must hold steady heat, because cooking and shelter depend on it. Rest and cooking share the same room, making every corner serve several purposes. Serving begins carefully, with each bowl carrying the effort of the pot. A quiet pause near the meal shows how work and rest overlap indoors. At the low table, eating together completes the long chain of preparation. Each bowl is handled slowly, because hot food is also needed recovery. Sharing one meal turns a small table into the center of the home. A close spoonful shows how meat, noodles, and broth become one practical dish. Outside, goats rest beside stored wood, linking animals, fuel, and shelter. Even dung has value here, becoming fuel where wood is limited. A tired dog rests in the shade, part of the camp's working order. Crossing this open plain requires planning, fuel, and machines kept close. The motorcycle helps reach scattered animals, but the rocky land still decides pace. Water for the herd is drawn from the ground with patient effort. Around the well, people and animals gather where one resource controls the day. The pump and herd work together, turning machinery into access to water. Small tools reduce strain, but steady hands still guide the work. The motorcycle waits among goats, ready for the next move across rough ground. Milking happens beside the herd, turning animal care into food for later. A small motor adds power to work still shaped by dust and distance. Each goat represents food, movement, and continuity where crops are difficult. The herd keeps moving because grazing is scattered across dry hills. Bare rock and thin plants show how little the land gives easily. Seen against the cliffs, the herd depends on people guiding every route. Horses add another form of mobility where distance is part of daily life. The round home stands with modern tools, adapting without losing its movable design. Inside, animal fiber is sorted by hand for use beyond the herd. Pulling the fibers apart turns raw material. There is something the household can manage. At the doorway, the dog marks the edge between shelter and open land. Small pieces of fiber are checked closely, making use of what animals provide. Evening returns the work indoors, while the setting sun closes the outside day. As light drops, the herd is guided back before the plain turns dark. The goats bunch together, making movement easier across the wide ground. Keeping the animals close becomes the evening task before night fully arrives. Care reaches the smallest goats, because tomorrow's herd begins with them. Their coats and steady footing show animals suited to dry, uneven ground. The sunset is beautiful, but it also signals the need to settle. From above, the camp appears small against the darkening open plain. Night brings the work back indoors, where milk and heat take over. Dried dairy pieces show how milk is preserved beyond a single meal. The pot is watched closely, because milk can become food for later days. Serving warm milk keeps the evening centered around the stove and shared labor. A bowl is lifted slowly, bringing the room's warmth directly into the body. Together, they sort the curds, separating food that must dry and keep. The cloth becomes a drying surface, turning the floor into a preservation table. Each small piece is shaped by hand so moisture can leave evenly. A single curd on the carpet shows how detailed this slow work becomes. Quiet faces and lowered hands show the night's work continuing without hurry. The final conversation stays close to the stove, where the day's labor settles. Outside, the lit doorway holds a small island of warmth in darkness.